This isn't a story that would make it in Hollywood. The story doesn't have a happy ending. For every fond memory of this place, there's a rush of anger or a strain of sadness for what it's become.
It was just a good place to grow up, a lot of good friends, a lot of good times. Raising my family here was, I wouldn't do it anywhere else, you know. If I had to go back and do it again, I'd do it again right here.
Just a mile off historic Route 66, tucked into a lightly traveled corner of northeast Oklahoma, lies the remnants of a town deemed environmentally uninhabitable.
Earlier, I told my own two children, I said, you need to watch what happens because you're never going to see this again in your life. Towns just don't disappear.
Maybe you've heard of the town, maybe you haven't. But one way or another, there's more to the story than meets the eye. Disenfranchisement, bitterness, and an unquenched longing for life as it used to be.
I just want this story to be our side of the story, what we actually went through as a family and a community.
What would it take for you to leave behind the only place you'd ever called home?
Most people never have to face that. They either leave by choice or they never leave at all. But what if you didn't have a choice?
I'm Parker Thune.
And I'm Baylor Hurst.
And this is the story of Pitcher, Oklahoma.
It's 6 a.m. on a Friday morning in September. As the sun rises behind dreary clouds, we're on the road through the heartland. Our destination lies in the far northeast portion of Oklahoma, 1 mile from the Kansas border and 12 from the Missouri border. It's an old mining town called Pitcher, the former epicenter of the Tri-State Mining District.
So I've been around mining my entire life, and one of the interesting things is that a lot of people just don't know that the Tri-State District exists. They don't think of Oklahoma as a mining state. They don't know about Tar Creek.
Robert Nairn is a scientist who specializes in ecosystem restoration. He's been working and studying the environment in Pitcher for over 2 decades.
So the Tri-State Mining District was one of the greatest lead-zinc mining fields in the world in its heyday. Mining began in Oklahoma in the 1890s. Really came in about 1914 when the Great Pitcher Field was discovered. So it became a tremendously important producer of lead and zinc. And the folks that grew up in that corner of Oklahoma and Ottawa County like to say that they mined the lead and zinc that won the First and Second World War. And there's truth to that. They did. That was how important this mining field was.
But 5 decades later, mining operations in Pitcher had run their course.
Things had begun to wane. Ore prices had changed. The extent of mining, the amount of mining that was going on decreased. So by the 1960s, it was essentially a played-out field, and there were very few mines that continued through the 1960s. So that by 1970, everything was over. The pumps that had kept the mines dry for all those decades of mining were shut off about 1970.
And that's when things took a turn for the worse in Pitcher. The groundwater seeped back into the shafts and absorbed an acutely toxic cocktail of chemicals.
Tar Creek, which had been a clear stream when things were pumped over time, very quickly turned into an orange stream, laden with iron oxides and all the other things that went along with it.
It didn't take long for residents in the area to realize that something had gone catastrophically wrong with Tar Creek's ecosystem.
Their experts, EPA's experts, and everybody else's came. And they did some work, and they plugged some wells, they did some things to try to stop Tar Creek running orange.
And it wasn't just the water in Pitcher that posed a threat to human health. So too did the huge piles of mine waste or chat that had accumulated around the town. Dozens of piles, some hundreds of feet high, contained hazardous dust and airborne toxins.
It wasn't until the early 1990s that the Indian Health Service did a survey of children in the watershed and found that 35% had elevated blood leads. So that was not necessarily a drinking water related lead exposure. It was an exposure to lead in dust and some in the solid form.
And what they found was, it was not only Indian children, it was much, much worse and much broader.
Meanwhile, the EPA had long since decided that Pitcher simply couldn't be saved.
The bad water continued to pour out into the streams and was deemed by the Record of Decision in 1984 to be irretrievably damaged by past mining practices, and therefore it wasn't treated. So there's a legal definition in Superfund under CERCLA that they could use a fund balancing waiver. It says it costs too much to fix the problem, so they're not going to fix it. And that's essentially what happened since 1984.
The end was near for Pitcher. By 2009, after a mass exodus spurred by 2 rounds of federal property buyouts, the town had officially been disincorporated. In the eyes of the government, Pitcher, Oklahoma no longer existed.
It's a very hard thing to think that the landscape around you that you grew up playing on, that was your whole vision when you looked out the window, was actually harmful. We all knew it was dangerous, but nobody really put together that it was dangerous when the dust blew, when the wind blew, that it could be dangerous.
Now, more than a decade later, most of the town's infrastructure has been torn down, and little remains of Pitcher beyond the huge chat piles rising out of the horizon.
I just want you to know, you're going to see some pretty chilling stuff.
Okay. Though Parker has visited before, I've never been to Pitcher, and as we turn off Route 66 towards the ruins of the town, what I see shakes me. Oh my God.
See, there you go. You can see that big pile.
It's massive.
Get ready to take this in.
How do they get that high? Is it like landfill? Did they move it there, or is that a natural build?
That's 50 years of mining right there.
It's like what you imagine Egyptian sand dunes would look like. Now that we've arrived, I want to get a little more clarity on the state of the ecosystem here in Pitcher. So my first order of business is to meet up with Nick Shepard, who works in water remediation throughout the Tar Creek area. What exactly are we looking at right now?
So this is what we call a passive treatment system, and we're treating mine drainage. So mine drainage is basically the water below us, or mine workings. When the pumps shut off after mining, the water recharged from groundwater, refilled, and during that process, because of some chemistry underground, you kind of get a bunch of dissolved metals.
Okay.
So discharge here, just naturally under pressure, we get a lot of contaminated water. So the goal of these passive treatment systems is to basically remove those metals before it goes into any receiving stream.
As Nick explains his systems, a sputtering rain begins to soak us. It's a little ironic. As we're examining some of the most contaminated water in the world, some of nature's purest water is falling on us from above.
So these are different process units, each one kind of designed to target a different metal or a different process that we're aiming to do. So once we do that, then we can actually remove those metals one by one or in groups and discharge clean water. Basically, our goal here is to drop out the zinc and lead in particular. Everything's kind of being sequestered. Iron's mostly up front, but you're getting the zinc and lead out.
And before we leave Nick's remediation site, he helps us dispel a couple of popular environmental myths surrounding Pitcher and Tar Creek. Myth number 1, the contaminated water is completely uninhabitable for wildlife.
So if you go to Tar Creek, and even in Pitcher around Tar Creek, there's fish there, but not as many fish as you would see in a similar stream in a different part of the watershed. So the mining impact, just like everything else, there's sensitivity in the biology. Some fish are really sensitive to pollution and some are tolerant.
Myth number 2, the water in Pitcher is harmful and corrosive to the skin. I read a story about kids who would go swimming in swimming holes in Pitcher, and they would come out thinking that they had a tan, but it was actually chemical burns. Is there any validity to that?
You know, it depends on the time frame. Water chemistry's changed a lot from back in the day, but odds are what it was is just the iron oxide you're seeing. That orange water, it's just rust. So you can see I actually have it on my hand too. It's just iron, you know, it's nothing bad, and it obviously doesn't burn.
And as we say goodbye to Nick, he mentions a particular bridge in Pitcher where we can actually witness the pollution take effect.
You have Tar Creek coming in, and then on the right is an older channel that's known as the old Lytle channel, Lytle stream. And that's where we have a lot of discharges. So you'll see clear water and orange water coming together, especially at low flow right now, and the other side of the bridge where you get the orange. So that's where Tar Creek, you know, everyone knows that as that orange stream. That's really where it becomes the orange stream.
Once the rain subsides, we set out in search of the bridge. When we finally find it, the sight is absolutely stunning. On one side of the bridge, the water flows clear and serene, but by the time it reaches the other side, it's loaded with toxins and chemicals.
So I mean, look, you can see right here where the orange water, the contaminated water flows into the perfectly clear water. And right there, Baylor, like you were talking about, where the polluted runoff meets the water, you see you got bright orange coming in contact with the clear stuff. This is what it comes out looking like on the other side. Tar Creek is aptly named because that stuff is closer to tar than it is water.
As we prepare to sit down with some of the former residents of Pitcher, I've made arrangements to meet up with Jeff Reeves, the former Pitcher fire chief. With the rain sputtering on and off, we don't want to leave our cameras out in the elements, so Jeff shows us to one of the few buildings in Pitcher that still has power.
We're sitting in the old Pitcher Elementary School. Anyone that grew up in Pitcher came through this school in my generation. This was in particularly my third grade classroom all those years ago.
As the rain continues to fall, Pitcher natives drive through the storm from miles away, and one by one, they trickle into the school to give us their accounts of the town they'd called home, basking in the nostalgia as they sit down at the dusty desks.
I was born out on Spring River, east of Miami, and it would have been a route out of Miami. But I went to school all my 12 years here at Pitcher. Then we moved back here in 70, I believe, or 71, and ran a little grocery store first, and then went into business at a service station, kind of a one-stop out on the state line.
We were here 12 years, would have been here forever if things hadn't changed. But we were here for the 12 years. Our boys were in the 5th and 7th grade whenever things changed quickly.
I lived in Pitcher up until the buyout. I actually was part of the buyout. I had built a brand new home 3 years before the buyout talk started. So, and actually they relocated my home to an area outside of Quapaw also in another area.
They all agree on one thing. The community in Pitcher was one of a kind.
We all kind of bonded as a family around here. We all hung out together and everything. It was your basic small town, I suppose, but we really got along good, all of us mainly.
If you had a need, we made it work. And if I couldn't do it personally, I would go to find someone else who did, or an organization, or the fire department, or somebody. We'd make it work. That meant food, clothes, shoes, transportation. It didn't matter. That's what made us a family.
My childhood was amazing. It was great. We were just one big family. I mean, you didn't go anywhere that if you did something wrong, somebody was on the phone calling your mom and telling them.
Being able to just pretty much walk into anybody's house on any given day that I was friends with. And if you were hungry and there was food going, they set you another plate. Well, hi, Brian, you hungry?
Another common denominator among the residents is an appreciation for Pitcher's unique landscape.
The chat piles were our playgrounds, and in the wintertime you went sledding, and in the summertime you ran them to condition for athletics or whatever, or just to play on them.
With the chat piles, if we got good snow, it was great. We went sledding on them chat piles. So we always looked forward to it being an icy, packed down snow.
You know, little boys who played war and all that, we'd make our little forts in the chat and just play and romp around on the chat piles. And then in the wintertime, you get a piece of tin or a cardboard if you didn't have money for a sled. Walk up the chat pile and slide down, It's terrific for doing that.
We played on the chat piles our whole life. We sled down the chat piles in the wintertime. I'm sure we probably ate some along the way, and I don't know, but yes, we actually, the Little League baseball field had a big chat pile right beside it. So when I have two younger brothers, and when they would go play Little League baseball, the kids would climb up on it, and every once in a while you would hear the announcer say, "Kids, you have to get down off of the chat pile now."
I had a cousin. I have two cousins, three actually. All three of them are dirt bikers, and their kids are now too. And they tore these chat piles up.
As the town's former residents catch up with one another inside the school, I venture out with Brian Miller to explore the town.
Right here used to be one of the hangouts where this concrete slab is. This was D&D Drive-In.
It's hard to believe there were ever houses here.
Oh, yeah.
Being here for the first time.
Everywhere there was houses. These were nice mowed yards. That's still in the tree from the tornado.
Brian's comment jogs my memory. The tornado. In May 2008, an EF4 cyclone swept through Pitcher, killing several people and leaving cataclysmic damage.
My husband was on the mower, and a page came, or actually the chief came across the radio, and he said, "You guys need to head to Pitcher right now. It's bad." And the chief never gets upset. He never gets stressed out or anything, but you could tell in his voice that something big was coming.
I'm gonna have to get off here, but we're okay? All right, bye.
It's the most helpless feeling you'll ever have. Until people see those large vortex tornadoes up close, they don't realize how intimidating and devastating they are. But it's the most helpless feeling I've ever had in my life, because there's just absolutely nothing you can do.
You could see the black, and I mean, it was huge. It was ginormous.
We came flying back and was able to get over here, and yeah, there was nothing there. That was up on what we call the hill up south of Pitcher, but it was gone.
But we just went to work, trying to save people's lives and trying to get them out of the debris and different things. We went to work.
Oh, wow. I was shocked at what some of the stuff I saw. Mainly, like, seeing a 4x4 truck in a tree, and not just one, lots of them, like there were Matchbox cars. You've seen that all down the road. Cars and trees, cars, just in unbelievably places they shouldn't be.
This was just a dirt back road. They didn't pave that till a long time later. But the tornado come right through here. That's why all these trees go to the right. Trees are gone. You see them damaged over there.
Mm-hmm. For a town that was already struggling to survive, the untimely natural disaster amounted to a death knell.
That was really kind of the nail in the coffin. The buyout was in the works, but it was a slow process. Houses were gone, and then it was very quick. People were forced then to go other places, and things really changed after the tornado. I mean, then everything was really done.
The community as a whole after that was pretty much anybody that had planned on staying, which my parents were one of them, that was not going to take the buyout. They were, in their 60s, and they were content where they were. They were going to stay, but it completely destroyed their home. Anybody that hadn't decided or made up their mind officially to move after that, I think that was the last straw.
Throughout Pitcher's history, there was always one thing that brought the entire town together: Like many small communities in Oklahoma, the entirety of Pitcher lived vicariously through their high school sports teams. The Pitcher Cardin Gorillas were the pride of the town.
And here you go. Heyman Field. This is where the whole town was every Friday night in the fall.
It's been nearly 15 years since Heyman Field hosted its last game, but it still seems to percolate with some semblance of life.
I have to imagine for a small Oklahoma town that revolved around football, as most small towns in Oklahoma do, this was more or less an escape from everything that was going on in the outside world. And if you look around, that's the sense you get. Standing right here on this field in Pitcher, look around across the horizon and everything seems normal. There's nothing eerie, there's nothing frightening about this scene even today.
And as I step into Pitcher Cardin High School's old field house, it's almost a spiritual experience.
So obviously here in the field house, it's fallen into disrepair. There's paint peeling off the walls, everything's decaying, birds have overrun the place, but it's still standing. And in a town where so many of the structures have been torn apart or moved, I think it's very reflective of this town's identity, the fact that the athletic complexes are still in place, because the reality is in this town, everybody was a gorilla. The athletics at Pitcher Cardin High School were something that the entire community rallied around.
And as I walk around the venue that was once known as the Gorilla Cage, I can't help but take note of how appropriate the mascot really is.
I think the gorilla is a pretty perfect emblem of this town, at least when it was in its heyday, because you think about what this town was built on is miners, right? Man strength. Those are physically strong people, and the gorilla is a very physically strong animal.
Meanwhile, as I continue to look around in the vicinity of the high school, I come upon a startling discovery. Tucked away in what appears to be an old wood shop are several boxes loaded to the brim with athletic plaques and trophies.
There's a trophy from 1958. Here's a trophy from 2002. That's almost half a century of town history right here on this table.
However, there's one trophy that's conspicuously missing. It currently resides under lock and key in the Baxter Springs Heritage Museum just across the Kansas border. But fortunately, the achievement that it signifies is also represented by the town's most revered monument.
Now, this stone gorilla may be the most iconic item left in this town. It commemorates Pitcher Cardin's only athletic state title.
In 1984, the Gorilla football team went 15-0, capturing the 1A state championship.
The championship run wasn't by any means unforeseen. Heading into the season, the players knew that they had a legitimate shot at glory.
Came together and had a great coach, great defense, and after our junior year, we realized that we're going to have a good season. Everybody expected us to go to state, at least go, if not win.
Our team, we started playing ball together in the 3rd grade, and there weren't very many move-ins or move-outs, and we just played together from the 8th to 3rd grade. And so you just have all that continuity all the way through. We knew we were pretty good as sophomores, juniors, and we thought we had a chance.
And as the season began, head coach Chris Collier, who was just 29 years old at the time, pushed the Gorillas to strive for greatness. As his players recall, Collier was never satisfied with their performance, even as they racked up blowout win after blowout win.
Early on, we thought Coach Collier was crazy because we ran, I cannot tell you how many sprints we ran, but we didn't play in the second half. The game was over by then,
We just beat down a lot of our local schools. We didn't even get scored on until the 6th game of the year.
I can remember back when we won a football game by 48, 50 points. Coach Carter takes us back on the practice field the next Monday and lines us up, and we have to run like 40-40s because, we didn't play as well as he expected us to. And
I was 29 years old. So yeah, I was pretty hard on him. I probably wouldn't be that hard on him now, if I hadn't, because just the experience I have with it. But yeah, being 29 years old and them being 17, 18 years old, I was pretty hard on them.
The Gorillas rolled through the first 14 games unchallenged and utterly dominant. But the 15th and final game of the season pitted Pitcher against Fox, the #1 team in the state. A single camera tape of that fateful night in Bristow has been preserved. Though it's old and grainy, it's the only existing footage of any game from the Gorillas' 1984 season.
We went in super confident, and I think the reason we were so confident because we had played so long together.
We knew we were pretty special. Didn't know how special until we got towards the end. And then we started looking at film at Fox and thought, oh boy.
It's the #1 team. They just put a whooping on people. We had a great offense, but our defense was what was so special. And they had this offense that was just incredibly talented, big, fast.
They still have the record in 400-meter relay in the state of Oklahoma. And they were the leading scorer in the state, Class A.
Every bleacher was filled and they were 4 or 5 deep on the sideline. I can remember getting hit on the sideline one time and running into 2 or 3 people on the track. There were so many people there.
That crowd included legendary University of Oklahoma coaches Barry Switzer and Merv Johnson, who were there to scout Henry.
First kickoff, we run a reverse, and they were so fast, they got down there and we're on the 4-yard line, our own 4-yard line at the very beginning of the game. And so our first play, I knew that they were going to key on shell. So first play of the series, we ran a trap with Sammy. He breaks about 55 yards, 60 yards.
I think the turning point of the game was the first play of the game when Sammy went 50 yards. I think that set the tempo for the game.
Sam Freeman's 51-yard run kicked off what would become a first-half firefight. When the two teams headed to the locker rooms at halftime, Fox led 21-16, and the two teams had combined for over 400 yards of offense.
Fox was a second-half team. They had been winning 14-7 at halftime and come out and beat the team 70-7,
But when the Gorillas returned to the field in the second half, what they saw invigorated them.
Then we walk out the locker room and it's raining. Fox had never played in the rain or under really harsh conditions. When we practiced and it was raining, practice be over and we're all running out, diving in puddles, playing tackle the man football. Our coach would get upset with us because we'd take a chance on hurting ourselves, but it was just fun. That was things you do.
And as the skies opened above them, the Gorillas slammed the door on Fox's vaunted offense.
So when we went back out second half and they fumbled 5 times, and then we come back and held them to 0 in the second half.
But while the defense held their ground, the Gorilla offense couldn't find the end zone. Late in the third quarter, Pitcher finally had a chance to get the ball across the goal line, but ended up facing a 4th and 2 from the Fox 3-yard line. Collier called timeout to dial up a dive play for Shell Henry. That's when the Gorillas experienced a bit of divine intervention.
Sammy, our fullback, went through the hole. Shell went through. He was right on the end zone. He gets hit and he fumbles.
Play was a lead where Sammy was supposed to be lead blocking for me. Why he was behind me when I fumbled, nobody will ever know, other than it was meant for us to win that game.
Well, Sammy had already blocked somebody and turned sideways, and the ball bounced up right in his hands.
Landed in Sammy's hands, and he walks in the end zone.
Right there, Sammy's supposed to be blocking, and he's right there catching the ball and going in and scoring, and we're looking around like, what happened?
That's destiny, man. It was meant to be,
I don't know exactly how it happened. I've watched film, and I still can't figure out what happened. God had to have something to do with it.
As it turned out, Freeman's improbable touchdown was all the Gorillas would need. Fox's offense could make no headway in the fourth quarter, crippled by the muddy turf, the onslaught of rain, and the spirited Pitcher defense.
If they sustained a long drive, they would be fumbling or throw an interception or whatever they did, penalty or whatever.
And they were driving on us. And I don't remember who caused the fumble, but I remember Brian Deathridge landed on it. And when he jumped up, the game was over.
When the clock hit 0, Pitcher ruled Class 1A.
I went down to my knees, and our center, who was our other linebacker with me, Philip Seaman, plowed me. I was down on my knees like, oh gosh, we did it, and boom, he hits me and throws me back, and it's like everybody was a dog pile.
People that traveled from, traveled many miles to watch the game that we didn't even know that was out there hugging us after the game like they'd known us our whole life, that was from Pitcher.
I think that Fox underestimated us, being just a bunch of rednecks from Pitcher, Oklahoma, because they knew they were a lot faster than us.
It's been 41 years I've been in coaching, and out of the 41 years, I haven't been to the finals since. So, I mean, that tells you something about getting that far and going that far. And for these young men to accomplish something like that, it was just, unbelievable.
But as is the norm in small-town Oklahoma, the focus quickly shifted to the next season's sport, even in the wake of a state championship.
You start in August, you play football, you transition to basketball, and you play baseball and run track at the same time. I mean, it's just what we did. That's just what it was. Everybody did it, And if you didn't play basketball, you were going to weight meets. If you didn't play baseball, you ran track. If you didn't run track, you played baseball. I missed the Friday nights. I missed the camaraderie with the coaches. Brian Miller. I'll put $100 on it. That guy led the state in block punts our senior year.
35 years later, their town and their school no longer exist. But the glory of that magical run in 1984 will never wane. It remains a unifying force for those who called Pitcher home.
There is a reason why we won the state championship. And I really feel like the reason why, God knew that Pitcher wasn't going to be anymore. And he wanted to give us something to remember us by.
You would feel welcome to come to Pitcher, Oklahoma.
You didn't have to worry about your kids after school if you wasn't going to be home from work, because the neighbors would take care of them.
Pitcher, America, the most polluted spot in the world, and here I am. I wouldn't change a thing.
It's truly a melancholy experience to walk around and look at the specter of such a beloved town. But it's our responsibility to see the whole picture. We start in the town square.
I'm willing to bet that this right here was damaged in the tornado. This kind of damage could only have been done by a tornado.
Yeah, look at the tire. Torn to pieces. Next stop, Pitcher Cardin High School, where all but a single door is locked or bolted shut. The interior could only be described as haunting.
I don't know what to think, man.
We're greeted by a welcome change as we make our final stops. For the first time all weekend, the sun peeks out from behind the clouds.
So this is what's left of the old Pitcher Mining Museum. Now this museum was actually destroyed by arson in 2015. So you can see the charred remains of the foundation and the woodwork in the house. All that's really left is the brick and the concrete foundation. Everything else burned.
And the museum wasn't the only structure in Pitcher that fell victim to suspicious fire.
Yeah, so there were actually two iconic buildings here in Pitcher that were destroyed within the span of a year. One was the Mining Museum, and then the other was the Baptist Church in Douthit.
As the sun begins to set, we make our way back to the heart of Pitcher.
This used to be backyards, basically. We're walking along what was once a city block. You had houses sitting on these concrete pads, these trees lining the fences.
Nearly all of the residences in Pitcher have been torn down, but several houses still stand in one neighborhood.
It just looks like a regular house. Sink, room for a stove, fume hood, back porch here.
With their town reduced to rubble and ruins, those who called Pitcher home still harbor resentment, especially toward the federal buyout process.
Like I say, some of those people, they were scared to death. They thought they were going to cut off their electric, cut off their water. They had no place to live, the ones that weren't in the tornado.
They started saying, well, you will not have electric, you will not have water, you will not have sewer. And then I got scared.
The government essentially offered these families a sum of money to move away and start a new life.
I laughed at first. I'm just like, I heard the lead poisoning and all the stuff, and I'm thinking, I swam in those places. I rode motorcycles when I was a kid. I slid down our chat piles, and I've eaten more gravel than, you know, I'm just like.
You can live in a place like this, as all these people proved for decades.
Do you think that the move out was necessary?
No.
Why?
Well, the way I look at it is the mining fields are from, I believe they started somewhere in the Miami area, and they go clear to the Joplin area, and there's undermining all the way through, so why would it just be one target area?
Above all, there's one thing that the residents of Pitcher want the world to know. They loved their town. They led wonderful lives, and plenty of the demeaning narratives surrounding their town are exaggerated or simply untrue.
So the issue of contaminated water here in Pitcher was actually cleaned up pretty quickly as far as drinking and hygiene goes. This water is actually drinkable, and that's because as soon as they realized that the water sources in the town were contaminated, they drilled new wells to circumvent the contamination. So this water is actually perfectly safe to drink. So I will.
I get aggravated when I see or hear things that are not accurate, or I just like to see people be open-minded about it and not just think it was a cesspool, because it wasn't. You know, a lot of good people here, a lot of good things here.
If you've never been here and you've never lived here, you just probably will never know.
Didn't drink, didn't smoke. We just had fun the summers. We all played ball together. It was just a year-round thing. It was just always fun. I never grew up bored in Pitcher, Oklahoma.
We're proud people. And a lot of good folks come from here.
Before we leave Pitcher, we've got one final stop to make. I'm sorry, but I guess this is just where our journey has to end.
Parky Thune, Baylor Hurst coming at you. Welcome to a chat pile. I don't question that the people who essentially condemned this town because of the environmental catastrophe knew what they were talking about. But at the same time, I can't imagine just looking at this stuff, how it's so toxic. It's just gravel.
No, the alkali comes from chat. The ponds that we swam in had alkali in them because it would run off of the chat piles down into the pond. It didn't seem to hurt us.
Chat piles, I mean, I climbed up on chat piles all my life.
My legs are on fire.
I'm breathing heavy. I can see how that 1984 team won the state championship if they were running up and down these every day. So I'll tell you what, this is a workout.
If you were a kid in Pitcher, don't you think you would have been playing on this stuff too?
Oh, 100%. Maybe your first inclination is to think, okay, maybe they're just being chauvinistic about their hometown, but this actually looks like it would be a really fun environment to grow up in, honestly.
It's very unique, and I know people have said, we don't understand, we don't understand why you're like that, but it was a unique thing, and it really is. It is unique.
The walk down's much easier than the walk up.
Can you imagine being 12, 13, 14 and just walking around and saying this? Look at how beautiful this is.
It was an amazing place, and now it's just completely gone.
You know, it's like losing a loved one. That's how the best way I can describe it. It's like losing a loved one. The devastation and the pain is there, but as the years go by, you adjust and you move on.
You stand there on that field or in that gym, and you think about what a mecca it was for a town of this size. And something about it being empty and deserted just strikes you.
So much life happened here, and now there's just nothing.
I'm still a little bit bitter. I'm sad and I'm bitter that it happened. Wish, we do a lot of, in our family, we do a lot of what ifs. What if that group of kids had stayed together? What if our boys had graduated from here? They didn't get to graduate from here, and they would have.
I still don't understand. We haven't had any cave-ins to speak of. I mean, we've just been around this place forever.
Home is home. It doesn't matter where it is. It doesn't matter what's around it. It doesn't matter what other people think of it.
Getting out of high school, I thought, I want away from this and get away from this. Joined the military, went to San Diego, California. I couldn't wait to get out. The whole time I was there, I couldn't wait to go back. I missed my home. It's always been home. And I think that's what everybody felt when they came here.
We don't even have class reunions here. We don't have homecomings, There's no more football games to come to, no basketball games. Like I said, we used to have 5 or 6 track meets a year. Now look at this place.
I used to be able to ride through this town on a bicycle. I could have done it blindfolded and told you where I was at.
I always just want to turn and go this way to come home. And I can't. And that's what's hard.
And yeah, the ecosystem's wrecked here. But the physical, the geographical, that's not all there is to a community. And I don't think there's any better evidence of that than the people we met and the things we saw here in Pitcher.
Every resident that ever lived there has Pitcher in their heart. And so it's really funny. You cannot destroy that. You cannot destroy it. And my hope is that never goes away.
All the stories that you hear are terrible and bad. And don't tell the true story of what everybody went through. I mean, not only us, but our kids.
There's deep grief when you have to leave home when you don't want to. There's the feelings that happen when you shut the door for the last time for many folks.
Pitcher was always a proud community, and I think that pride still shines through in the people today. And one of the saddest things that ever crossed my mind is once that last generation is gone, who's going to carry that on? Because it's going to happen. There's going to come a point in time where there's no one left from Pitcher.
All the more reason why the story of Pitcher, Oklahoma needs to be told.
Why it happened, everybody has their own reason, logic behind all that, and now it's just tough because it's gone. I mean, whose town disappears, I've got 2 boys, and I said, you guys need to watch what's going on because you're never going to see this again.
If you drove past today and you didn't realize what those chop piles were, you would have had no idea that this is a mining town. Because again, we're in Oklahoma, we're in the foothills of the Ozarks. You don't drive through this region and think this is mining territory.
This story, it needs to be out there, that there are still damaged places in this country and in this world that can be repaired, but that have been damaged by industrial processes.
I like to think of myself as an optimist. I like to think that if we work together, that we can make a real difference. And I think there's some evidence that is happening. We are making progress.
It's not our job to tell the story. It's the residents, the people that lived this experience, that should tell the story. And I think they did.